In the bustling heart of Silicon Valley, where innovation thrived and dreams were either made or crushed, there lived a man named Marcus Reed. Marcus was not just another name in the tech world. He was a beacon of hope for many who aspired to break barriers. A brilliant mind with an unyielding passion for artificial intelligence, Marcus had spent years climbing the ladder of success through sheer determination and hard work. Born and raised in a small town on the outskirts of Chicago, Marcus grew up surrounded by challenges. His family struggled financially, but his parents always emphasized education as the key to unlocking opportunities. From a young age, Marcus showed an affinity for technology. He would spend hours tinkering with old computers that his father brought home from repair shops, teaching himself how things worked. By the time he graduated high school, Marcus had already built his first app, a simple tool designed to help local businesses manage inventory more efficiently. Marcus's journey took him to one of the most prestigious universities in the country, where he earned a degree in computer science. There he stood out not only because of his talent but also because he was often the only black student in advanced engineering classes. Despite feeling like an outsider at times, Marcus pushed forward, driven by the belief that representation mattered. If he could succeed, others like him might find their paths easier. After graduation, Marcus founded his own startup, a company focused on developing cutting-edge AI solutions tailored to underserved communities. His vision resonated deeply with investors, earning him widespread recognition. Over the years, his company grew exponentially, securing lucrative deals and partnerships across industries. One such deal, a $2.4 billion AI partnership with a major multinational corporation, was poised to be the crowning achievement of his career. The partnership promised groundbreaking advancements in healthcare, education, and environmental sustainability. For Marcus, it wasn't just about money. It was about proving that diverse voices could lead transformative change. He envisioned a future where technology served everyone equally, regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic status. This deal symbolized progress, not just for him personally, but for the entire community he represented. Despite his accomplishments, Marcus remained humble. Friends described him as approachable and kind-hearted, someone who never forgot where he came from. Every year he returned to his hometown to mentor young students, encouraging them to pursue careers in STEM fields. "You don't have to look a certain way to make an impact," he often told them. "Your ideas matter." As news of the $2.4 billion partnership spread, excitement rippled through the tech industry. Colleagues congratulated Marcus, calling him a trailblazer. Journalists clamored for interviews, eager to tell the story of a self-made entrepreneur, changing the game. But amidst all the praise, whispers of skepticism lingered. Some wondered if Marcus truly deserved this level of acclaim, or if external factors played a role in his rise. Little did Marcus know, these murmurs would soon escalate into something far more sinister. As preparations for the partnership moved forward, tensions began to simmer beneath the surface. At its core, this collaboration held immense potential for good. Yet, within the confines of corporate politics, even the best intentions can unravel unexpectedly. For now, however, Marcus basked in the glow of his achievements. Surrounded by friends, family, and colleagues, he allowed himself a moment to reflect on how far he'd come. The road ahead seemed bright, filled with promise and possibility. But unbeknownst to him, a storm loomed on the horizon, one that would test everything he believed in and force him to confront uncomfortable truths about ambition, identity, and resilience. And so, the stage was set. The rising star prepared to shine brighter than ever before, but not without facing shadows that threatened to dim his light. The meeting room at Innovatech Global, one of the largest multinational corporations in the world, buzzed with anticipation. Marcus Reed sat at the center of a long, polished table surrounded by executives dressed in tailored suits. This was the official kickoff for the $2.4 billion AI partnership that had been months in the making. Cameras flashed as photographers captured the historic moment, Marcus shaking hands with Innovatech's CEO, Richard Langston, against a backdrop of sleek digital screens showcasing futuristic AI models. On paper, everything seemed perfect. Marcus's company brought innovation and cutting-edge solutions to the table, while Innovatech provided resources and global reach. Together, they promised to revolutionize industries like healthcare, education, and environmental sustainability. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered quietly, unnoticed by most. Richard Langston, though outwardly charismatic, had reservations about working with Marcus. He admired Marcus's technical brilliance, but struggled to reconcile it with his own biases. Richard came from a traditional corporate background where leadership roles were dominated by people who looked and spoke like him, mostly white men in their 50s or 60s. To him, Marcus's youth, race, and unconventional approach represented a disruption to the status quo. While he publicly praised Marcus during press conferences privately, Richard often dismissed his ideas as too idealistic or unrealistic. The first few weeks of collaboration went smoothly enough. Teams from both companies worked tirelessly to align goals and timelines. Marcus traveled frequently between Silicon Valley and Innovatech's headquarters in New York, pouring his energy into ensuring the project's success. Yet subtle signs of resistance began to emerge. Some senior managers at Innovatech questioned Marcus's authority, bypassing him to speak directly with junior members of his team. Others openly criticized his focus on underserved communities, arguing that such initiatives would dilute profits. One particular incident stood out. During a strategy session, Marcus proposed integrating AI tools designed to assist low-income schools in accessing better educational resources. His presentation was met with polite applause, but as soon as the meeting ended, whispers filled the room. One executive muttered loud enough for others to hear, "We're not running a charity here." Another chimed in, "Maybe Reed should stick to what he knows instead of trying to play savior." Marcus overheard these comments but chose not to confront them directly. Instead, he reminded himself why he started this journey, to create meaningful change. Still, the remarks stung. They planted seeds of doubt in his mind, making him question whether he truly belonged in this space. Was he being judged solely on his abilities, or were other factors influencing how people perceived him? Things escalated further when Richard called an impromptu meeting to discuss budget allocations. Marcus arrived prepared, armed with data and projections showing how investing in community-focused AI projects could yield long-term benefits. However, before he could even present his case, Richard interrupted him. "Marcus," he said with a condescending smile, "let's face it, your heart is in the right place, but we need practical solutions, not feel-good experiments." The comment hung heavy in the air. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. For years he'd faced skepticism and prejudice, yet he always managed to rise above it. This time, however, something felt different. It wasn't just Richard's words, it was the dismissive tone. The way he addressed Marcus as if talking to a child rather than an equal partner. Despite feeling slighted, Marcus maintained his composure. "With all due respect, Richard," he replied calmly, "these aren't experiments. They're proven strategies backed by research. If we want this partnership to succeed, we can't ignore the human element." His response earned nods from some colleagues, particularly younger employees and interns who admired Marcus's vision. But Richard merely shrugged, brushing off the argument without engaging further. As the meeting concluded, Marcus couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. He realized that no matter how many accolades he received or how much value he brought to the table, there were still those who refused to see him as an equal. Back at his hotel later that evening, Marcus stared out the window at the glittering skyline of New York City. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages congratulating him on another successful day of negotiations. On the outside, everything appeared fine. Inside, however, cracks were beginning to form. Doubts crept in, whispering questions he thought he'd silenced long ago. Will I ever truly belong here? Am I fighting a losing battle? As days turned into weeks, the tension continued to build. What started as minor disagreements and passive-aggressive remarks now threatened to boil over into something far more explosive. Marcus knew he couldn't ignore the growing rift forever. Something had to give, and soon. Unbeknownst to everyone involved, This simmering conflict would soon erupt into a public spectacle, forcing Marcus to make a decision that would define not only his career but also his legacy. For now, though, he remained focused, determined to prove that his vision was worth fighting for, even if it meant standing alone. The tension between Marcus Reed and Innovatech Global reached a tipping point during what was supposed to be a routine progress review meeting. Held in a sleek conference room at Innovatech's headquarters, the session was attended by senior executives, project managers, and key stakeholders from both companies. Marcus entered the room with his usual calm demeanor, carrying folders filled with detailed reports and projections. He had spent countless hours preparing for this presentation, determined to demonstrate the value of his team's work and secure their continued support. From the outset, however, things felt off. Richard Langston, Innovatech's CEO, seemed unusually impatient. He tapped his pen against the table as Marcus began speaking, glancing at his watch more than once. When Marcus highlighted the potential impact of AI tools designed to improve access to healthcare in underserved communities, Richard interrupted him mid-sentence. "Marcus," Richard said, his tone dripping with condescension, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but let's focus on priorities that actually generate revenue. We're running a business, not a charity." The room fell silent. Marcus paused, his hands gripping the edge of the podium. He took a deep breath before responding, careful to keep his voice steady. "These initiatives do generate value for society and for our brand. They build trust and create opportunities for sustainable growth." Richard smirked, leaning back in his chair. Sustainable growth? That sounds nice in theory, but shareholders don't care about feel-good stories. They care about numbers. His gaze shifted toward the other executives seated around the table. "Am I right?" A few nodded hesitantly, while others avoided eye contact altogether. Some looked uncomfortable, clearly uneasy with the direction the conversation was taking. Marcus noticed subtle exchanges, furtive glances, awkward shifts in posture, but no one spoke up in his defense. It was as though an invisible barrier separated him from the rest of the group, reinforcing the sense that he didn't belong. Determined to stay professional, Marcus pressed on with his presentation. But Richard wasn't done. As Marcus discussed cost projections for implementing AI solutions in rural areas, Richard interjected again, this time raising his voice. "Let's cut to the chase, Marcus. Your ideas are admirable, sure, but they're impractical. You're asking us to invest millions without any guarantee of returns. Honestly, it feels like you're out of touch with how things work here." The comment struck a nerve. Marcus clenched his fists under the table, his knuckles turning white. He had faced criticism before, but this felt different, personal, almost, calculated. For years, he'd worked tirelessly to prove himself in an industry that often doubted people who looked like him. Now, despite all his achievements, he found himself being dismissed yet again. "I'm not out of touch," Marcus replied firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "I've built my career on delivering results. Every proposal I've presented has been thoroughly researched and vetted. If anything, I'd say, you're the one out of touch with the needs of real people." The room erupted into murmurs. Richard's face reddened, caught off guard by Marcus's boldness. For a moment it seemed as though he might retaliate further, but instead he forced a laugh. "Feisty, aren't you?" he quipped, attempting to lighten the mood. "Look, Marcus, we just need to see more concrete plans. Maybe you should revisit your strategy and come back when you have something realistic." With those words, Richard effectively dismissed Marcus's contributions, reducing months of hard work to mere suggestions. The meeting adjourned shortly afterward, leaving Marcus seething with frustration. Outside the conference room, colleagues offered polite smiles and vague reassurances, but none dared challenge Richard's authority. Once again, Marcus found himself isolated, battling forces far beyond technical disagreements. That evening, Marcus returned to his hotel, exhausted and disheartened. Sitting alone in his dimly lit room, he replayed the day's events in his mind. He thought about the countless times he'd been underestimated, doubted, or outright dismissed because of his background. Each instance chipped away at his confidence, no matter how much he tried to rise above it. But tonight something inside him shifted. Enough was enough. He realized that staying silent only perpetuated the problem. If he allowed Richard and others like him to dictate the narrative, he risked losing not just this partnership, but also the integrity of his vision. As he stared at the documents spread across the desk, Marcus made a decision. He wouldn't back down. He couldn't. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about standing up for every person who had ever been told their dreams were too ambitious, or their voices didn't matter. With renewed resolve, Marcus picked up his phone and began drafting an email to Richard, outlining his concerns and demanding accountability. Little did Marcus know, this act of defiance would set off a chain reaction that would ripple far beyond the confines of Innovatech Global. By choosing to speak out, he was stepping into uncharted territory, a place where courage clashed with power and principles outweighed profits. And as dawn broke over the city skyline, Marcus knew there was no turning back. The next morning, Marcus Reed sent the email that would change everything. Addressed directly to Richard Langston and copied to Innovatech's entire executive board, the message was concise yet unflinching. In it, Marcus outlined his grievances, the dismissive comments, the lack of respect for his ideas, and the undermining of his authority as a partner in the $2.4 billion AI collaboration. He ended with a clear statement: if this partnership is to succeed, we must address these issues openly and honestly. Otherwise, I see no path forward. At first, silence followed. Hours passed without a response from Richard or anyone else at Innovatech. Marcus spent the day fielding calls from concerned colleagues and advisors who urged him to reconsider escalating the matter. Some warned him about jeopardizing the deal. Others cautioned him against confronting such a powerful figure in public. But Marcus stood firm. After years of navigating corporate politics while biting his tongue, he realized this moment wasn't just about him. It was about setting a precedent for how marginalized voices were treated in spaces dominated by privilege. By late afternoon, the situation took an unexpected turn. Someone, whether intentionally or accidentally, leaked the email to the media. Within hours, headlines exploded across tech blogs and news outlets. Black tech advisor calls out discrimination in high-stakes AI deal. Read one. Another proclaimed, Marcus Reed challenges Innovatech leadership amid tensions. Social media platforms lit up with debates, support messages, and critiques, amplifying the story far beyond what Marcus had anticipated. Richard Langston reacted, swiftly but poorly. During an emergency press conference held later that evening, he attempted to downplay the controversy. Standing behind a podium emblazoned with Innovatech's logo, Richard adopted a tone of forced calm. "This is nothing more than a misunderstanding," he said, flashing a practiced smile for the cameras. "Marcus is a valued partner, and any disagreements are simply part of doing business. We remain committed to making this partnership work." But his words rang hollow. Journalists pressed him with pointed questions. Why had Marcus felt compelled to write such an email? What steps was Innovatech taking to ensure equitable treatment of all partners? Richard stumbled through his responses, growing visibly agitated, as reporters highlighted specific instances of bias mentioned in Marcus's letter. By the end of the briefing, Richard's carefully crafted image as a progressive leader began to crack under scrutiny. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself thrust into the spotlight. Messages poured in from supporters around the world, students, entrepreneurs, activists, and even rival executives, all praising his courage. Many shared their own stories of being marginalized in professional settings, expressing gratitude for his willingness to speak out. Yet not everyone was supportive. Critics accused Marcus of playing the victim card to gain sympathy, while some questioned whether his actions might harm the very communities he sought to uplift by derailing the partnership. Amid the chaos, Marcus remained focused. He knew the coming days would test his resolve, but he also understood the weight of the platform he now had. That night, after hours of interviews and phone calls, Marcus sat down with his closest advisor, Elena Torres. A trusted confidant and former colleague, Elena had witnessed Marcus's journey from its earliest stages. "You've ignited something big," Elena said, leaning forward in her chair. "People are watching, not just here but globally. How you handle this will define your legacy." "I know," Marcus replied, rubbing his temples. "But I didn't do this for fame or attention. I did it because someone needed to say something. If I don't stand my ground now, what message does that send?" Elena nodded thoughtfully. "Then let's make sure your voice is heard loud and clear. You've got two choices: walk away or fight for real change. Either way, you need a plan." The conversation gave Marcus clarity. Over the next few days, he worked tirelessly with his team to craft a detailed proposal outlining actionable steps Innovatech could take to address systemic inequities within its leadership structure. The document included recommendations like mandatory diversity training, transparent decision-making processes, and measurable goals for inclusivity. It wasn't just about fixing one broken partnership. It was about challenging an entire system. When the proposal was ready, Marcus released it publicly, framing it as a blueprint for meaningful progress. "This isn't personal," he wrote in an accompanying statement. "It's about creating an environment where innovation thrives because everyone has a seat at the table. Let's use this moment to build something better for all of us." The ETA move caught Innovatech off guard. Executives scrambled to respond, torn between defending their reputation and addressing legitimate concerns. Behind closed doors, discussions grew heated. Some board members argued that Marcus's demands were unreasonable, while others acknowledged the mounting pressure from shareholders and the public to act. As tensions escalated, rumors swirled about the future of the partnership. Would Marcus withdraw entirely? Could Innovatech salvage the deal without losing face? For now, uncertainty loomed large, leaving both sides teetering on the brink of irreparable fallout. For Marcus, however, the stakes had never been clearer. This wasn't just about a single partnership. It was about proving that integrity mattered more than profit, and that standing up for justice was worth whatever price came with it. As he prepared for the next phase of the battle, Marcus knew one thing for certain: the world was watching, and he couldn't afford to back down. The days following Marcus Reed's public proposal were nothing short of chaotic. Innovatech Global found itself under intense scrutiny, with media outlets dissecting every move the company made, or failed to make. Shareholders demanded answers during emergency board meetings, while employees took to internal forums and anonymous messaging apps to voice their opinions. For the first time in its decades-long history, Innovatech faced a crisis that went beyond financial performance or market competition. It was being held accountable for its culture. Richard Langston, once seen as a visionary leader, now appeared defensive and out of touch. Interviews he gave to salvage his image only dug the hole deeper. In one particularly disastrous appearance on a popular tech podcast, Richard attempted to justify his earlier remarks about Marcus's ideas being impractical. When pressed by the host about why Marcus's vision didn't align with Innovatech's goals, Richard stumbled over his words, inadvertently implying that profit-driven strategies inherently excluded social impact initiatives. The clip went viral, sparking outrage online. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to gain momentum. His proposal for systemic change within Innovatech resonated deeply with audiences worldwide. People admired not only his courage but also the practicality of his recommendations. Influential figures in the tech industry began endorsing his approach, calling it a roadmap for inclusive innovation. Even some of Innovatech's own junior employees rallied behind Marcus, sharing stories of discrimination and microaggressions they had experienced within the company. One such employee, Priya Mehta, an AI researcher at Innovatech, posted an open letter on LinkedIn. "Marcus Reed is speaking truth to power," she wrote. "I've worked here for 5 years, and I've seen firsthand how voices like mine and like his are sidelined. If we want to lead in technology, we must lead in humanity too." Her post received thousands of likes and comments, further amplifying the growing movement. As pressure mounted, cracks began to form within Innovatech's leadership team. Some executives argued that appeasing Marcus would set a dangerous precedent, making the company appear weak. Others recognized the urgency of addressing the backlash before it spiraled further out of control. Among them was Sarah Chen, the chief operating officer, who had quietly supported Marcus's contributions from the beginning. During a heated board meeting, Sarah spoke up forcefully. "We're losing credibility, not just with Marcus but with our workforce, our partners, and the public," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "If we don't take meaningful action, this scandal will haunt us for years. We need to show the world that we're capable of change." Her words struck a nerve. After hours of debate, the board reluctantly agreed to issue a formal response acknowledging Marcus's concerns and pledging to implement reforms. However, the statement fell flat. Critics pointed out its lack of specifics and accused Innovatech of offering empty promises. Marcus himself addressed the matter in a follow-up interview, stating, "Words are cheap. What matters is action." Behind the scenes, negotiations between Marcus's team and Innovatech grew increasingly tense. Richard refused to budge on key aspects of Marcus's proposal, insisting that certain measures, like tying executive bonuses to diversity metrics, were unrealistic and too radical. Each meeting ended in deadlock, leaving both sides frustrated. Faced with mounting resistance, Marcus made a bold decision. He announced that unless Innovatech committed to tangible changes within 2 weeks, he would withdraw his $2.4 billion partnership entirely. The ultimatum sent shockwaves through the tech world. Investors panicked, fearing the loss of what was supposed to be a transformative collaboration. Analysts speculated about the potential fallout for Innovatech's stock price and reputation. For Marcus, the decision wasn't easy. Withdrawing meant walking away from years of hard work and jeopardizing opportunities for his team, but he believed that compromising his principles would come at an even greater cost. "This isn't just about me," he told Elena during a late-night strategy session. "If I let them off the hook now, nothing will change. Someone has to draw the line." As the deadline approached, the stakes reached a fever pitch. Protesters gathered outside Innovatech's headquarters, holding signs that read, "Justice for Marcus Reed," and "Tech needs equity." Social media campaigns trended globally, with hashtags like Stand with Marcus and Inclusive AI dominating platforms. Even competitors in the tech industry weighed in, praising Marcus's stance and urging Innovatech to do better. Inside the company, divisions deepened. Junior staff organized walkouts, demanding accountability from leadership. Senior executives clashed over whether to capitulate to Marcus's demands or risk losing the partnership altogether. Richard, feeling cornered, lashed out in private meetings, accusing dissenters of betraying the company. On the final day of the 2-week period, Marcus prepared for the worst. Surrounded by his core team, he reviewed contingency plans for moving forward without Innovatech. Yet as midnight approached, an unexpected email arrived from Sarah Chen. It contained a draft agreement outlining Innovatech's commitment to adopting most of Marcus's proposed reforms, along with a personal apology from Sarah herself. Though skeptical, Marcus saw glimmers of hope. Perhaps this was the turning point, a chance to turn adversity into progress. As he read the document, he realized that the battle wasn't over, but for the first time, victory felt within reach. The draft agreement from Sarah Chen arrived just hours before Marcus Reed's ultimatum was set to expire. It was a carefully worded document outlining Innovatech Global's commitment to implementing several of Marcus's proposed reforms. Among the promises were initiatives like mandatory diversity training for all employees, the establishment of an independent advisory board to oversee inclusivity efforts, and measurable goals tied to executive performance evaluations. While not perfect, the proposal represented a significant shift in tone and potentially action from a company that had long resisted such changes. Marcus read through the document multiple times, his mind racing with questions. Was this a genuine step toward progress, or merely a desperate attempt to save face? He shared the draft with his closest advisors, including Elena Torres, who scrutinized every line. "It's a start," Elena said cautiously. "But we need assurances. Words on paper mean nothing if they're not backed by accountability. Together, Marcus and his team drafted a counter-proposal, adding stricter timelines and third-party oversight mechanisms to ensure compliance. They also requested public transparency, insisting that Innovatech release annual reports detailing its progress, or lack thereof, on these commitments. By dawn, Marcus sent the revised terms back to Sarah, along with a note. "This is our final offer. If you truly believe in change, prove it." Sarah responded within hours, her reply filled with a mix of relief and determination. "I'll fight for this," she wrote, "but I can't promise Richard will go quietly." Her honesty underscored the internal struggles still brewing at Innovatech. Despite growing pressure from shareholders, employees, and the public, Richard Langston remained resistant to any measure he perceived as undermining his authority. Over the next few days, negotiations intensified. Sarah acted as a mediator between Marcus and the rest of Innovatech's leadership, navigating the delicate balance of appeasing both sides. Richard, however, continued to dig in his heels. During one particularly heated board meeting, he accused Sarah of betraying the company's values, slamming his fist on the table and declaring, "We're not running some social experiment here." His outburst only fueled further dissent among the executives. Several members of the board began questioning Richard's fitness to lead, especially as the negative publicity surrounding him reached new heights. Articles dissecting his leadership, style-dominated business publications, painting him as a relic of outdated corporate thinking. Even longtime allies started distancing themselves, fearing association with his increasingly toxic reputation. Amid the turmoil, Marcus maintained a calm but firm stance. He refused to compromise on core principles, knowing that bending now would weaken the foundation of the entire effort. Publicly, he remained silent, allowing the movement to speak for itself. Privately, though, he worked tirelessly, consulting with legal experts, diversity advocates, and trusted mentors to ensure the agreement held weight. Finally, after days of back and forth, a breakthrough came. Richard, cornered by mounting criticism and facing potential revolt from within the board, reluctantly agreed to sign off on the revised terms. The final agreement included nearly all of Marcus's demands, along with provisions for regular audits conducted by an external ethics committee. To mark the occasion, Innovatech issued a public statement acknowledging past shortcomings and pledging to become a leader in workplace equity and inclusion. The announcement sparked mixed reactions. Supporters celebrated the milestone, hailing it as a victory for underrepresented voices in tech. Critics remained wary, warning that true transformation would require sustained effort, not just lip service. For Marcus, the outcome was bittersweet. On one hand, he had achieved something monumental, holding a multi-billion-dollar corporation accountable for systemic inequities. On the other hand, he knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. In the weeks that followed, Marcus turned his attention to ensuring the agreement translated into real-world impact. He collaborated closely with Sarah and her team to roll out initial programs, emphasizing transparency and community involvement. He also used his platform to advocate for broader industry-wide reforms, calling on other tech giants to follow suit. Yet even as progress unfolded, tensions lingered. Richard's resentment simmered beneath the surface, manifesting in passive-aggressive remarks during meetings and thinly veiled attempts to undermine Marcus's influence. Meanwhile, some factions within Innovatech quietly worked to delay or dilute the implementation of certain reforms, testing Marcus's resolve at every turn. Despite the obstacles, Marcus refused to waver. He reminded himself daily why he had taken this stand, not for personal glory but for the countless others who deserved a fair chance to thrive. As he stood on stage at a global tech summit weeks later, addressing an audience of thousands, Marcus delivered a powerful message. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen without resistance. But when we choose courage over comfort, justice over profit, and unity over division, we create a future worth fighting for. The crowd erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. In that moment, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle wasn't over, but he had proven that standing up for what was right could inspire others to do the same. And as he stepped off stage, surrounded by supporters and allies, he knew the journey was far from finished, but neither was the hope it carried. Months after the groundbreaking agreement between Marcus Reed and Innovatech Global, the tech industry began to feel the ripple effects of his courageous stand. What started as a single man's fight against systemic injustice had evolved into a movement that challenged the status quo across corporate America. The partnership itself flourished, with Marcus's AI tools making significant strides in underserved communities, improving access to healthcare, education, and environmental sustainability. Yet the true impact extended far beyond numbers or profits. It lay in the conversations sparked, the doors opened, and the minds changed. At Innovatech, the reforms were slow but steady. Mandatory diversity training sessions became a cornerstone of employee development programs, fostering greater awareness and empathy within teams. Independent audits revealed areas where progress lagged, prompting swift corrective actions. Sarah Chen emerged as a champion for change, spearheading initiatives that empowered underrepresented voices within the company. Her leadership inspired others to step forward, creating a culture of accountability that once seemed impossible under Richard Langston's tenure. Richard himself faded into obscurity. Following months of internal strife and public backlash, he resigned from his position as CEO, citing personal reasons. His departure marked the end of an era, one defined by exclusionary practices and outdated ideologies. Though some feared his exit would leave a void in leadership, Innovatech proved otherwise. Under Sarah's guidance, the company embraced a new vision, one rooted in inclusivity, transparency, and innovation, driven by diverse perspectives. For Marcus, life took on a rhythm of purposeful momentum. He continued to lead his own company, while serving as a consultant for Innovatech, ensuring the partnership stayed true to its mission. Beyond work, he devoted time to mentoring young entrepreneurs, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds. His story became a beacon of hope for aspiring innovators who often felt invisible in spaces dominated by privilege. "If I can, do it," Marcus frequently told them. "So can you. Don't let anyone tell you your dreams are too big or too small." The media spotlight shifted over time, focusing less on Marcus personally and more on the broader implications of his actions. Tech conferences dedicated panels to discussing equity and artificial intelligence, while universities incorporated case studies of the Innovatech controversy into their curricula. Slowly but surely, the narrative around representation in technology transformed from skepticism about its necessity to recognition of its critical importance. Yet, not everything was smooth sailing. Resistance persisted, both subtle and overt. Some critics dismissed the reforms as performative, accusing companies like Innovatech of prioritizing optics over substance. Others argued that Marcus's success was an anomaly, unlikely to be replicated by others facing similar challenges. While these voices tried to undermine progress, they only strengthened Marcus's resolve. Every obstacle reminded him why this fight mattered, and why giving up was never an option. One evening, nearly a year after the agreement was signed, Marcus found himself standing on a stage once again, this time at his alma mater. The university had invited him to deliver the commencement address, honoring him as a trailblazer whose journey embodied resilience and integrity. As he looked out at the sea of graduates clad in caps and gowns, memories flooded back. The struggles, the victories, the moments when doubt threatened to consume him. "Class of 20XX, Marcus began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "You're stepping into a world that desperately needs your creativity, your passion, and your courage. You'll face challenges. Some will test your patience, others your faith. But remember this, every challenge is also an opportunity to redefine what's possible." He paused, scanning the faces before him. "I didn't set out to make headlines or change an entire industry. I simply wanted to build solutions that helped people. Along the way, I learned something powerful. When we refuse to accept the unacceptable, we create space for transformation, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us." Applause erupted as Marcus concluded his speech, echoing through the auditorium like waves crashing against the shore. Tears welled in the eyes of many, including Elena, who sat proudly in the front row. For all the hardships Marcus had endured, the joy in this moment was undeniable, a testament to how far he'd come and how much farther he'd pushed the world alongside him. In the years that followed, Marcus's legacy grew. His name became synonymous with advocacy, innovation, and unwavering determination. The $2.4 billion partnership served as proof that profit and purpose could coexist and thrive together. More importantly, it demonstrated the power of standing firm in the face of adversity, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. As Marcus walked off stage that evening, surrounded by well-wishers and admirers, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. It hadn't been easy, nor had it been perfect, but it had been worth it. And as he glanced toward the horizon, he knew the best was yet to come. For him, for the industry, and for generations to come.